Mr. President, I rise to discuss my bill and briefly the underlying, my amendment and the underlying bill. But first I want to thank my co-sponsors, Senators Coates, McConnell, Coburn, Hatch, Kirk, and Johans, and I want to thank the bipartisan coalition of senators who are supporting my approach. Mr. President, there is a real problem with our flood insurance program as a result of the reforms, and it needs to be addressed. And the problem is that in the process of reforming this program so that it would actually be sustainable, so that it actually could become solvent, in the process of making those changes, some people's premiums go up very, very dramatically and pretty suddenly. The phase-in is very quick and the increase is very high. And that's a huge problem and it needs to be addressed. The Menendez bill addresses it the wrong way. What this bill does is it does kill the meaningful reform. It completely suspends for 4 years. There is no adjustment of premiums towards an actuarially sound, market-based level of premiums that don't require taxpayer subsidy. So we'll be going back, oh, it busts the budget, by the way, and we'll be going back to a system where literally Warren Buffett can buy a home, and as long as he makes it his primary residence, he can continue to have taxpayers subsidize his cost of flood insurance. I just don't know how that's even remotely defensible. But that's what we would be heading back to if we adopt the Menendez bill. In addition, by throwing out the reform, by throwing out the movement towards an actuarially sound system, we go right back to the insolvent, unsustainable program we had before, which means the NFIP under the Menendez bill will that much sooner reach the day when it cannot honor its claims, when the people who've been paying their insurance premiums discover that there is no money to honor their claim when the flood occurs because it doesn't have the reforms that put it on a sustainable basis. Finally, it's flawed because it can't become law. This approach is not going to become law. We know that. It's not just me who opposes this. The administration does not accept this approach. This is what the Statement of Administration Policy put out this week by the President of the United States about this bill. He referred to this bill specifically and said delaying implementation of these reforms, the reforms referring to the bigger water reforms, would further erode the financial position of the NFIP, which is already $24 billion in debt. This delay would also reduce FEMA's ability to pay future claims made by all policyholders. The Speaker of the House and the leadership in the House feel the same way. They're not willing to throw out the reforms and leave us with an NFIP that cannot honor its claims. They're not going to do it. So if you really want to do something for the people who are facing these big premium increases, you've got to support a program, an approach that actually works. That's why I've offered this amendment. And I urge my colleagues to support this amendment. What we do, it's simple. We phase in the premium increases gradually. For people facing a big premium increase, we phase it in very gradually. It gives people time to adjust, time to mitigate, time to challenge if the map is drawn wrong. They can do that. We preserve the important, valuable ideas in the Menendez bill, such as the ability to recoup the cost of a successful challenge to a mapping problem for an individual homeowner, also for a community. That's there. That's important. We preserve the opportunity to have the benefit and force NFIP to recognize the benefit of mitigation measures that have been taken by others. So if your community has built a levee or a dam or some kind of flood mitigation system, even with or without federal money, that needs to be acknowledged, that needs to be reflected, that if your community, your home is safer because of that investment, that your premium needs to reflect the fact that you have a safer situation. We cover that as well. Finally, the administration supports this approach. In the very same Statement of Administration Policy, President Obama's administration stated this: the administration strongly supports a phased transition to actuarially sound flood insurance rates. The Menendez bill absolutely does not do this. My amendment absolutely does, because this is what makes sense. This is how we soften the blow, we create a reasonable transition, and we maintain a fiscally sound, actuarially sound program that doesn't bust the budget. That's what my amendment does. Finally, let me just conclude with this, Mr. President. There are a lot of members of this body on both sides of the aisle who have spent a lot of time, especially in recent years, in sincere, concerted, ongoing efforts to address one of the biggest challenges we face as a country, and that is the fiscally unsustainable position of our federal government, driven by mandatory spending. We've cut discretionary spending significantly as a percentage of our budget, as a percentage of our economy. Any way you measure it, discretionary spending has been squeezed. Mandatory spending has been almost completely untouched, and it's growing far too fast. Recently, this body, including every Democrat who supports this Menendez bill, voted for a reform of one mandatory program that makes it sustainable, makes it viable. We shouldn't be walking away. I mean, if we are at all serious about getting our mandatory spending under control, we shouldn't walk away from this reform. Please, I urge my colleagues, support the Toomey amendment, and I yield back my time.
Under the previous order, there will be 2 minutes of debate equally divided prior to a vote on amendment number 2707, offered by the senator from Pennsylvania, Mr. Toomey.